This is our league, and this is your league. Broadcasting from the 55-yard line in Japan to the shores of the Great White North and everywhere around the world on Gridiron America Radio and the Sports History Network.
Hey everybody, welcome to From the 55-Yard Line. It's Dave and I, and we are pleased to be joined by Don and Heath from the Third Down Gamble podcast. One of my favorite podcasts when I first got into podcast listening. It was the first one I think I listened to. Heath, Don, hey, you guys are up there in Canada. Thank you very much for joining Dave and I.
Thank you. Appreciate
Great to
the
be
invite.
back.
Yeah,
it's hard to believe it's been a year already.
Yeah, because last year, you guys sat down with me and we talked and we did a preview of the upcoming season. So as we got into April into May, I'm like, okay, we got, Dave and I, we got to get you on and do a preview for the 2024 season, which, if I remember correctly, when we were talking about the season, I don't think any of us would have predicted Montreal to win it all.
I think less than 3% of any people that play the CFL games that were out there where you could pick the winner and all that sort of stuff. I believe less than 3% picked the Alouettes. And partly you wouldn't blame them because as you went deep into the season, the Alouettes were kind of floundering. And then they pick up a couple of key ingredients, go on an 8-game winning streak, do something they hadn't done all year, which was beat a team with a better record than their own, and do that in Toronto against the 16-2 Argonauts, and then win the Grey Cup in one of the best Grey Cups ever.
Yeah, and so this year, I mean, with the season, so is Montreal still? I mean, it's hard to pick against the defending champion, but who would you guys say, all three of you, is really the team to beat this year with the season coming up?
It's really hard to predict. I think the turmoil that the Toronto Argonauts are going through right now sets them back. Given what they did in the regular season last year, if Chad Kelly was their starter, you'd have to think that they were in the driver's seat in the East. Winnipeg is going to still be strong. BC is going. The defending champions are the ones that you got to really look at coming from the East. I think until they get knocked off, they're the favorite in that East division.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, real quickly before we go on, I'm getting some feedback on your end.
Okay.
Yeah. No, just real quickly. So, I'm getting. We were doing because this is live, obviously. So I'm like going around. I was like, I'm hearing a noise in the background, so I'm going around with everything. So just to give you a heads up, there's feedback on your end with your microphone. So okay. I don't know.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but no, you're good right now. But it's weird because I've been going around. So, guys, I apologize. So let's just start off. Let's start from the East. We're going to go all the way out to the West. So let's start out with Montreal, defending champions. What the three of yours take with Montreal? How are they looking this season coming in?
The Alouettes overall, I think, are going to be as strong. They did lose on some elements, and especially with the receiving core. They've lost a couple of key players there, but the offensive line is still stout. The defensive line, depending on what happens with Sean Lemon, will be even stronger. Gluak is not going to be there, at least the beginning of the season. And he was a masterful addition once they brought him up from the practice roster. He really helped them turn the tide. Overall, Cody Fajardo proved that he could win the big game. Their running game could be suspect because William Stanback isn't there. They're gone a different direction. we'll see what happens. But I think the Alouettes would probably be, along with Toronto, the two teams that you have to fear in the East.
And Dave, what do you think?
I agree 100%. With so much uncertainty, as you guys had talked about with Toronto, it looks to be the next logical choice. I'm really curious to see. I don't think there's any kind of hangover, but I'm really curious to see how they start the year off. Being the defending champions and see how that just plays out as you start off the season. So I'll be curious to see it, but it looks as though they're going to have another strong team. What does that really mean at the end of the day? I don't know, but on paper they're looking good to start off the season for sure.
And Heath, what do you think?
Yeah, I think defense is going to be key for the Alouettes. We really saw that in the second half of last season, and Marc-Antoine Ducroix at safety, Tyrese Beverett on that linebacking core are stalwarts, and they really stepped up last year, drove the team. The defense was winning the games for them. Austin Mack going to the NFL is a big loss on that offensive side. He and Cody Fajardo seemed to really click. It was one of those almost automatics where if Fajardo found him in single coverage, the ball was going his way, he was coming down with it. So I think there's a little bit of a setback on offense right now. But as far as the East goes, who else is going to be better? And that's a question that I think we need to kind of look into.
And in terms of, off the field, let's talk fan support, the business of football. How is Montreal shaking out this year? Because with the change of ownership, there's been a lot going on, obviously, with the front office. Where do you guys see? Are they in much better shape than they were, last year, the year before? I mean, where is it, even including fan engagement and that stuff?
Alouettes are really strong this year. Pierre-Marc Pelledeau, who's the new owner, he has Videotron, so he's got a marketing vehicle built in with that. And the Alouettes have really engaged very well. Their season ticket base is shot up because of the Grey Cup win. The Alouettes, if you ever go to their website, they do it in both English and French, which is very different for most teams in professional sport, except for maybe the Montreal Canadiens. But overall, I think what he's done and what they're doing is a great model. And when we get to BC, we'll talk about Amar Damon, who's doing the same thing in BC. These are the guys that are leading the way in terms of what you need to do to engage.
Okay. And then moving on down the road to Ottawa, how are the Red Blacks looking this year? Can they improve? Will they improve? I mean, it's not been for all my Red Black fans out there, it's been a painful last couple of years.
I'll jump in. I guess it's going to be, can they survive can they avoid injuries? And to me, that's the biggest wild card in the CFL for me is if they stay healthy, they can really make a run. They can make it interesting in the East, but I think it's really going to see if injuries hamper the quarterback play. I think that would be for myself. I think if you can call it, they're due for a good season. But being due for a season and having it happen, I'm not sure if that really takes place. But I think they could be the surprise team for me in the East.
A big change this year is the quarterback situation. They've brought in Drew Brown from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. He doesn't have a lot of starts under his belt, but he did some great things last season coming in relief as Zach Collaros. They've already lost their all-star returner and a really good running back to injury. So that injury bug's crept in a little bit already. I think offensively, though, they will be a lot better off than they have been in the previous couple of seasons. Jeremiah Mazzoli being the marquee quarterback they brought in that hasn't been able to stay healthy. It's really going to be, is Drew Brown the difference maker? They do have a couple of other young quarterbacks waiting in the wings there as well. So they're going to be fun to watch. I think they've kind of got nowhere to go but up. I don't know if they're going to be a contender for the East title, but I think they are going to be improved from what we've seen the last couple of seasons.
Yeah. And Don, what do you say?
Well, I agree with Heath on that. Since they were in the Grey Cup in 2018, the team's gone 14-45. And that is about a 250 clip. You can't succeed if you're going to be playing at that level. The quarterbacking is going to be huge. Drew Brown, a huge get for them through free agency. Jeremiah Mazzoli, he's a great leader in the locker room and on the field. He's going to help a lot. Question is, what do they do with Tyree Adams and Dustin Crum? One of those two is probably not going to be a red-black. Devontae Williams being out for the season before even the camp started hurts, because now what do they do at running back? But they've done well enough, I think, in years past. But Dave was exactly right. Injury bug. This team has been snake bitten. It's got to even out eventually where that team can stay healthy.
Okay. And listen, if I just don't want to misspeak here, but the Red Blacks, they still have the Fred Biletnikoff of the CFL playing for them in the presence of Jalen Ackland, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
But he's got to put up some numbers this year. He's got to be much better than what he was last year.
Yeah. I mean, I have a personal connection because him and I went to the same college. So anytime he pops up and grabs, I'm like, it's score one for a Leatherneck, a Western Illinois Leatherneck. So, but yeah, no, it's going to be. I mean, Ottawa. Yeah, it's just weird. It's amazing how that went from such a great team in 2018 to what we have now. It's just, and then they haven't been able to get out of that rut. I mean, it's been. It's going on 6 years since that Grey Cup run. So, yeah. So, but with that said, oh, Dave, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I do have a question for Donna and Heath, and just curiosity with having the 4 quarterbacks in. As an example, if Crum turns to be the odd man out, is there any opportunity to trade him, or is it just going to be everybody's going to wait for him to say, hey, we're going to release him, and then the team that wants him is going to sign him?
It's a possibility on both fronts. I don't know that there's a need right now to pick him up via trade. He'll probably have to clear waivers, and if, let's say, it is Crum, and wind up on the practice roster. If that isn't, it's so hard to know what will happen ultimately. I mean, Crum's going to get a lot of playing time in their final preseason game. That's going to really dictate what happens. And Tyree Adams, unfortunately, blew out his leg 2 games into his career last year. He was showing some good things. It'll be a big battle between those two, because the two that are getting paid the big bucks, Brown and Mazzoli, are not going to be unseated. So you've got to choose between the two. I don't think that there's a trade coming unless Calgary comes looking, because they are in a bit of trouble.
That's where I was going as well. The only team I could see considering a trade would be Calgary, unless something drastic happens tomorrow in these remaining preseason games and teams really start to panic, and maybe what they've got on their roster isn't what they're hoping for. They will be making final cuts here on Saturday. So I don't see a trade coming in the next couple of days. It's more likely going to be a roster move of somebody being cut and picked up by another team.
Thanks.
Okay.
I was just using Crum as the example. That's all.
No, it's all good because it is a close race for that quarterbacking room, and whether or not Adams or Crum gets in, it's going to be really tight. Both are good. It's just who impresses the coaches enough. And Bob Dice, he's not a fool by any stretch. He's a smart football coach. He knows what he needs to put out on the field. So he was happy with Crum last year. Crum started very well, but then sort of once the book was out on him, struggled. You've got to be able to produce over the long haul, and that's going to be the key for him to keep on this club.
Okay. And moving further west there, let's talk Argos. And of course, obviously, when you talk about the Argos, you got to talk about the 900-pound gorilla in the room right now with Chad Kelly. So aside from Chad Kelly, obviously, we all know what's going on there. How are the Argos looking this year? Are they reloaded? Or, I mean, can they get over the hump and win it, get past Montreal this year? Don, Dave, whoever wants to take the ball.
I got it here. Nobody wants to step on each other's toes. I get it. The Argos have been picked over pretty bad in free agency. It's one of those situations where putting together a 16-2 regular season, a lot of other teams start to look at what you're doing right. And there's some big losses there.
Okay.
AJ Ouellette, the running back, has gone to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. There's a few other guys that have gone on. Javon Leake has gone to Edmonton. They did pick up Janarian Grant in free agency. He was previously the Bombers kick return specialist, so that was a big pickup for them. But they're a team that, at least for the first half of the season, looks like they're going to be led by Cameron Dukes or Nick Arbuckle at quarterback, and that's a concern. So for them, they just need to hold the line as best they can and hope that Kelly's going to come back at some point this season. And at that point, they will probably make a playoff push, but they're behind one here to start the year.
And Toronto got picked over on defense too. Darius Pickett is now in Ottawa. That was a huge loss for them. They did manage to pick or keep a few of their players that they needed, but Jamal Peters is now in Hamilton. That's a loss. Of course, we all know what the other corner did, was drafted number in the 4th round by the Jets. Quantez Stiggers. Toronto, to me, is the real key is going to be the play of Cameron Dukes. Does he provide the leadership? Does he get that team over the hump? Because right now, I've said on our podcast, they are a team that is probably the most villainized going into a season that I can remember. And it's not necessarily the rest of the players' fault, but they're tied up in this whole situation just because they wear the double blue. The coaching staff, Ryan Dinwiddie, he's a pretty strong-willed person. I think he can guide them, but can Cameron Dukes lead them to victories? He played well when he had the chance last year. He played very well in Winnipeg and almost won there. He came to Regina and beat the Rough Riders, although at that time that might not have been saying much. But overall, the Argonauts won't be a 16-2. I think that's a given. And until the end of the suspension comes for their main quarterback, I'm sorry, I'm slipping on the name.
Kelly.
Yeah, Chad Kelly. It just, you hear it so many times, you almost forget it. If Chad Kelly does everything that he's supposed to do and gets through his process that the league is satisfied, maybe come Labor Day, we'll see him back leading this team. It's really hard to see that right now because of there is a court case, of course, going on that is pending. So the Argos are in a hurting way, but they're not as bad as you would think.
Well, that brings me up to the question from our audience. And Mike Tackett asked, can John Machoa be a reliable fill-in? What say you guys? What do you guys think?
It's an opportunity.
Sample size at this point.
Yeah, okay. I agree. It's an opportunity for him. This is a great chance because clearly the Argonauts are looking for somebody to be stable at quarterback. Dukes is going to get the first chance. I don't know if Arbuckle will be their number 2 pick, but maybe that's where Matocha can really do something and impress the coaches. But right now, that's a long way off. He's missed part of camp. He's already behind the 8 ball.
Okay. And let me ask you, when it comes to Toronto and football, we always, during the CFL season, I think anybody who watches a CFL game in Toronto kind of gets hung up on the attendance there. How is it looking this year with Toronto and fan engagement? Because I don't remember what the numbers were for attendance last year. Because unfortunately, I wasn't able to watch with the time change and the time shift here, able to watch every game, especially the early, the starts out of on the East Coast. How are the Argos looking from a business end, would you say?
Well, the 3 Down Nation once said about the Argonauts that any losses by the Argonauts are just a decimal point moving. They're very, very wealthy owners. That's not the issue. The problem with them is, as you said, fan engagement. Now, the Chad Kelly circumstances have not helped in the least. The way the Argos have handled it hasn't been the best either. They did have a tremendous attendance, especially in the East Final last year. Their attendance was growing as the season was going on. And of course, a winning team does that for you. I think the Argonauts can still maintain that momentum. The biggest thing that they have to fight with is the market in Toronto is so saturated. And you've really got to work hard to carve out your corner.
This whole situation with Kelly being suspended is so hurtful to the Argos, because with the great regular season last year, so many fans were coming to their first Argos game in years and really getting reinvigorated and enjoyed the experience. It's affordable compared to a Leafs or a Raptors game. You can bring your family out. People were starting to appreciate that, and they had a great product on the field. So we'll see what happens with the turnstiles at the start of this season, but a huge setback losing a marquee player. And because of Chad's connection to Uncle Jim Kelly, who was in Buffalo, that's a short drive away from Toronto Hamilton. So there was some recognition there. It's a tough pill to swallow.
Okay. Well, with that said, kind of a nice segue to wrap up the East here to talk about what's going on with Hamilton this year.
Well,
Don, I'll let you lead up.
Thank you. Hamilton, Scott Milanovich is now their new head coach. Orlando Steinhauer has moved up to become the president. Ed Hervey is their GM, and don't miss the fact that Ed Hervey is their new GM, because if he has had anything in his past, he knows how to get talent onto the field. He did it with Edmonton, got them to a Grey Cup and won it. I think he can do it again in Hamilton. He's got a great eye for that. The big question in Hamilton is obviously what's going to happen with Bo Levi Mitchell, and whether or not he, A, can be healthy enough to play a full season, and B, skillful enough to do it. A lot of talk is about the boot that he wears quite often to protect the leg that he injured last year against Ottawa. But I think the shoulder is the bigger issue, and that's what he injured in 2019. That type of injury takes a very long time for recovery, and even with all the rehab in the world, it's still going to be not as strong as what it was. Taylor Powell is the question mark. He's signed an extension through 2025. He seems to have more upside, but I think Milanovich likes the veteran leadership, and this is why Mitchell will, and especially given Calgary is their first opponent in Calgary to start the season, I think that's Mitchell's going to be starting to begin the season.
And Heath?
Yeah, I think one thing the Tiger Cats have going for them is Tim White is one of the top 5 receivers in the CFL. He's an exciting player. Regardless of who the quarterback is, he's going to put up some numbers. But that real challenge is who the quarterback is going to be. I would put money on Taylor Powell probably getting more starts than Bo Levi Mitchell this season. I think Bo will get the early starts, but we'll see what happens from there. And some concerns about their defense. I know they did have a big pickup, stealing one from down the road in Toronto. That's going to help them a lot. But, this is a team that 2019 were at the top of the league, and we've seen them kind of on a steady decline since then. The East is kind of up for grabs, though. We talked about, is Ottawa a contender? Is Toronto in trouble? So the chances of them making the playoffs are good. Beyond that, I can't be too confident.
And let me ask you, get your feel, Dave, because you're actually closer to Hamilton than anybody else there. I'll let you take the first swing at it. Might this be Bo Levi's last year? Because he's been around a while. What do you guys think in terms of his longevity? You think he still has more in the tank, more to prove to the league?
I think we'll know by July. I mean, that's my feeling. I don't know. I mean, I think I question do they have enough? And I think you guys might have talked about on the third down gamble too. Does Hamilton have enough weapons as well? I think that's an issue too, because you can't go to Tim White every play. So
they did sign Stephen Dunbar this week, who had been with the team.
That's right.
So that was a an ad that
is
probably
good,
helps.
Very
Yeah.
good ad. Yes.
Yeah.
That is true. I did forget about that, but I think it's not going to take long to know what he has left in the tank.
The problem with Bo right now is that he hasn't put in a full season since 2018. And so the book is out as to whether or not now he can finish a season, as you point out, Dave. Is he going to be there beyond July? Is it because of poor play or is it because of injury? And that's a string of bad luck for him if it's injury. But if it's poor play, that's quite another story. And you don't think at his age that his skill set should drop dramatically. But when you've got a shoulder injury, you haven't got a great plant leg, it adds up.
I think Scott Milanovic is going to have to be careful in how he nurtures the relationship too. Bo Levi Mitchell had some very harsh words for the organization after the playoff loss to Montreal last year. He was disappointed that he was not out on the field until he kind of got garbage time at the end. And if they're going to anoint him as the starter at the beginning of this year and he struggles, how do they navigate that? It's going to be a really interesting first few weeks. I think Dave's right. By July, we're going to know whether it's a extended career or if he's on his way out.
And we can't underestimate Scott Milanovic. He knows how to win, and he's taken the Argonauts to a Grey Cup victory, but he kept them in the playoffs when he was coaching there. He knows how to work on the sidelines. He knows how to get the most out of it, especially his offense. And that's going to be key because their defense is probably going to be okay. They've lost Ted Laurent. That hurt them, but they signed David Menard to replace him. So their Canadian ratio is okay. Tundo Adeleke is now in Toronto, so they're hurting on the backside, but they've got a couple of players that were moving up the ladder ready to play. The Tiger Cats, to me, if it's going to be Bo, he has to go into Calgary and beat the Stampeders to start the season. If they get spanked in Calgary, that may be it for him.
And with all that said, then let's move west to Winnipeg. We'll start with there. And okay, so are the Bombers going to win this year? Because it seems like every year it's the Bombers are going to win. The Bombers are going to win. So, Heath, I'll let you lead off on this one in terms of where do you think the Bombers are? I mean, I don't know. It's one of those teams it's always hard to bet against, but anytime I bet for them, they always lose. So
I have that relationship with the Bengals and the Browns in the NFL. As a Bomber fan, I certainly hope they win it all this year. They are definitely still a contender. I think the West is going to come down to the Bombers and the Lions fighting for first place. Age is something that we've been talking about with the Bombers for a few years now, and are they going to age out? They've done an amazing job of keeping that core group of players together for many seasons now. We saw Adam Bighill basically on one leg in the Grey Cup last year. He's probably the player I'm most concerned about age-wise. They lost DeMarcus Hardrick to Saskatchewan. They lost Rasheed Bailey. So a couple of losses there, but they've really still kept that core, and that's going to be key to them. Brady Oliveira, Dalton Schoen, Kenny Lawler on offense. That's a lot of weapons for Zach Collaros to work with. I think he's going to be excited. They're going to put up a lot of points. The defense has probably dropped off more than the offense has. So they're going to have to win some 35-28s and 42 to 30 somethings to fight for the top of the division.
Gotcha. And Don, your thoughts?
The age question is always there with the Blue Bombers because this team is, as a core, has been together, the most of them, for the last 5 years. And with that, you start to worry when a whole bunch of these players cross over the 30 barrier and some of them into the 35 barrier. Defensively, as Heath mentioned, yes, they've certainly taken a hit. What is Willie Jefferson going to be this year? His sidekick on the other side of the line isn't there anymore. That's going to be huge in all of this. The the whole notion that of 35-28 may be right, that the Bombers are just going to have to outshoot everybody to win. But they've got Kenny Lawler, they've got Dalton Schoen, they've got enough weapons on offense, Brady Oliveira, that they should be fine offensively. It's just a question. They've given up Demario Houston to the Stampeders in free agency. How many times can you fill holes and not take a drop off?
And Dave, your thoughts?
Being a fan of Canadian football, I'm all for the 43-40, 38-28 score. But since I'm not since Winnipeg's not, like, I love all 9 teams. I don't particularly have a favorite on that side of it. 42-40, I'm in every week. Let's do it. But if you're a fan, I get why that's crazy. But it exactly what Don and Heath said. I mean, the age is there, but you ride the core. You're not gonna. I mean, I can understand why Winnipeg has kept these guys together. You're gonna ride that as long as you can because you're winning. I get it. It's a great thing to have. Every team in the league would want it.
Right. And the thing that's always been special to me about Winnipeg is, they made the running game relevant again for years.
It's a style of their head coach.
So
Michael Day.
Yeah.
He likes to get out in front and then milk the clock. And that's
Do you guys think
really
that they're gonna incorporate Strevler more in the offense now that he's back?
I think so. I think Buck Pierce is a creative enough offensive coordinator that he's looking at different options. You can't throw Strevler out there and try to run the exact same playbook that you do with Zach Collaros, but he's a game changer in a different way. And if you have some structure in there with him and Brady Oliveira in the back or dumping it off to somebody else, it's going to be unpredictable. And I would like to see him out there for 10 snaps a game, if possible, just to kind of keep other teams on their toes. And they never know when he's just going to run one off and blow up a linebacker or a poor defensive back trying to bring him down.
Yeah, I mean, he's always been he's one of those players that he reminds me a lot of Taysom Hill. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife in Canadian football. They can kind of do it all, and obviously his specialty is third down, getting the short yardage and everything. Yeah, but he's one of those guys that he can. He's a quarterback, but he's built like a linebacker.
And Derek Taylor, he's been on our show. He's the voice of the Blue Bombers, has talked a little bit about the Jackson Jeffcoat leaving that defensive line and the stats that Willie Jefferson puts up when Jeffcoat isn't in the game. And it's night and day. When Jeffcoat was there taking a lot of attention away, Willie Jefferson was a monster. When Jeffcoat was out of the lineup, Willie Jefferson could be doubled and was non-existent. And I don't think we can underestimate how that's going to change, because if you don't have that pressure from the defensive line, Theodric Hansen's gone, Cameron Lawton is now injured and gone for 6 weeks. They're taking hits. It seems like there's almost too many to overcome. But then this team has done that regardless. They've overcome and still made 4 straight Grey Cups.
Yeah, wow, it's been 4 straight. Wow. It's been a while since I thought about how many they've been in a row, but yeah, it's been in 4. It's been in 4. Yeah. So, with that said, with everything said about Winnipeg, now let's move into your neighborhood and let's talk about the Riders. And I don't know which two should lead off, because both of you guys have season tickets. So, who's sitting the closest to the field? I guess I'll let lead off.
Well, that'll be me.
Okay.
Heath will go with me to games, but he does not have season tickets. To
okay. Then I'm sorry. I was thinking you guys both had season tickets.
No, it's an 8-hour drive to Winnipeg from here, so I
that's right.
I don't make that trek very often.
Sorry,
but I tag along.
My bad.
I tag along to Regina when I can.
My bad. It's always funny, guys. There's a lot of the guys live here in Tokyo. Lanny and Scotty. They did their Tokyo the CFL podcast here for years, but I always forget you're a Winnipeg fan. So same here with Lanny and Scotty, both those guys. But it's always like the Winnipeg and Saskatchewan guys are always the most entertaining fan bases because they're best friends, but the biggest rivals, kind of like Bears and Packers fans. So with that said, Don, Go ahead, Don. I'll let you lead off here.
Well, when you look at the Saskatchewan Roughriders, you look at a team that was trending backwards during Craig Dickinson's tenure. They host a West Final, they go to a West Final, and then 2 straight seasons they basically get wiped out after Labor Day and don't win a football game and fall out of the playoffs. Now they've got a new head coach, a new attitude. It's really going to be interesting to see how Trevor Harris holds up. He had a horrific knee injury last year. Lots of people don't come back from it. He was very fortunate that he could, but will he be strong enough to lead this team? A lot of people are putting a lot of faith in him. The bigger question at quarterback for the Rough Riders is who's going to be his backup. Is it going to be Mason Fine or Shea Patterson? And this is the big question coming out of Regina. We'll see what they do because they don't have any more preseason games to play. They've finished their tour, and this is all going to come down to game film and who's performing at practice.
Gotcha. Heath?
Yeah, Corey Mace and AJ Ouellette are 2 big additions for Saskatchewan. Craig Dickinson wasn't the most vocal rally the troops kind of head coach, and they needed a change. Corey Mace is a guy that the players are going to know where they stand with him, and to have him in, the fans are excited about a head coach. It's something that's very strange in professional sports sometimes, that people are that fired up about a new coach as a first-time head coach as well. He's had success in the league as a coordinator, but it's his chance to put his stamp on things. The receiving core is awesome. They've got one of the best receiving cores in the league. Now, Trevor Harris and his health and his age, can he get the ball deep to those guys, or is he going to have to rely on a quick release and hope for yards after the catch? That's going to be the big challenge on offense. I do think the Riders push for a playoff spot, maybe even contending for the number 2 spot if one of BC or Winnipeg slips a little bit. I think they'll be right in the mix.
Okay. And Dave, thoughts?
For me, this is the team I'm most excited about from the West. I mean, Winnipeg's Winnipeg, but from going last year to this year, I'm really excited to see what all the additions and what the Riders can do. I watched both the preseason games. They're exciting. It was exciting. They played good football. I was impressed for preseason games. But I guess my question is there any concern with Brett Lothar with the start? I know traditionally he has started slow, but it wasn't the best of kicking for the first couple games there.
That seems to be his MO, but he looks like he's going to try to kick himself off the team and then gets his kicking leg working the way it should, and he comes through with some clutch field goals. I don't think there's anything to worry about there. They may bring in another kicker just to challenge him a little bit, but I don't think that's a major concern. I think the bigger thing is that what does Corey Mace do with his defense? We saw in Edmonton, they were ball hawks. They turned the ball over quite a bit. If they can do that throughout the season, then that can make up for some shortcomings, because the Rough Riders offense, especially with Trevor Harris, isn't going to threaten you deep very often. So they're going to be a more dink and dunk, as you want to call it, a ball control with the passing game type of offense. And that means the defense is going to have to do a lot to keep them in games until that offense gets its feet underneath it.
What's the opinion of Shea Patterson? Because I've seen him play in the States quite a bit, so I'm familiar with him. I'm just want to see what the thoughts are from his camp this go around.
Well, Shea Patterson is dynamic. He moves the pocket around. He'll give you no-look passes. He's really, I think, if you're looking for a guy that's going to provide excitement, he's the guy. He's going to make things happen when he's out there. Meanwhile, Mason Fine, he's a tactician. He's probably the best passer I've seen in a long time. He throws a beautiful spiral. He puts it right where it needs to be. The question with Mason Fine is, does he read defenses as well? And he's not as adept to getting out of the pressure that Shea Patterson is. And I think that's why Shea Patterson right now is probably viewed as the logical backup to Harris.
Okay. And guys, we'll move on over to Edmonton, which leads to another viewer question from Michael Throp from the Player 54 podcast, who asks, can Edmonton compete this year?
Short answer is yes. I think bringing McLeod Bethel Thompson in at quarterback is going to stabilize them. Trey Ford was dynamic, but needs to develop a little bit more as a passing quarterback in this league. He could run around and look like Bo Jackson on Tecmo Bowl. They're just people unable to tackle him. But when you keep him in the pocket and make him pass, he has some learning to do. And McLeod Bethel Thompson is a guy that can teach him and bring him along. I think they've made some improvements elsewhere. As I mentioned, Javon Leake has come on as the kick returner. They've got Eugene Lewis, who's another one of the top receivers in the league. You know, a 6-win team made the playoffs from the West last year with Calgary. So if you look at improvements, I think Saskatchewan's going to be better. I think Edmonton's going to be better, and they will be in the mix. They're not a lock to make the playoffs by any means, but I think they'll be right there towards the end of the season.
So what you're saying is they have a chance.
They have a chance.
Don?
I'm not a big a fan as maybe some are about McLeod Bethel Thompson, because I think his intensity sometimes gets in his way, and he can really be meteoric. He can be really right on and just slice and dice, or he can get into an argument with the offensive coordinator on the sidelines and get distracted. And we saw both of that when he was with Toronto. He will help. He's been around. He knows the game. He will help. But whether he's the answer, I'm not so convinced. I was kind of leaning towards let Trey Ford develop, take a couple of lumps with him, but I think he's got more upside. Now that they brought in Thompson, I don't know if Ford even wants to be in Edmonton beyond this season when his contract runs out. And then what are you going to do? Because Thompson, like Harris, is getting up to his upper 30s. Harris is going to be 38 before he plays his first game in the regular season. Thompson, I believe, is 35, coming 36. It adds up. And you just take those beatings year after year. Your body can not do that forever. The Elks, the question is, what did they do to improve their defense? This is a defensive guru. They brought Jason Shivers over from Saskatchewan to help out. But Chris Jones, that was his thing. And yet he spent all his money on kickers, returners, and a quarterback. And he trades away Jake Ceresna, one of his top defensive linemen, to Toronto.
Dave, thoughts?
Well, my only thought on the defensive side is he feel with another year of working with the scheme. That's the only thing I can think of. I mean, the offense is I look at it this way: the West is going to play more high scoring, more pretty football, but when you need the stops, when you need to ratchet it down as we get close to the playoffs, is that going to be there? And I don't know if Edmonton's going to have. I don't know if Edmonton has enough to compete in the long haul to make the playoffs. I think the improvement will continue to be there. I think there'll be more wins than last year. I don't know how many more, but I don't know if they've done enough to get them up the ladder high enough to see, hey, we're gonna get in this time. But that's really, it's one of those things where it all has to play out. It's going to go from week to week on who's performing. As it's very, very quarterback driven league. And if your quarterback is humming along and making plays and the offense is clicking, you're scoring points, and all of a sudden you're on a 5-game winning streak and you don't even know where this come from.
Right. Well, with Edmonton also comes the off-field issues too, with ownership, with attendance. So Don, Heath, you guys are closer to everything that's going on up there. What's going on with the ownership situation, with the fan, the fan engagement? I mean, all of us, we're friends with guys at the Turf District podcast. So, I mean, they probably they're always my go. Anything Edmonton, they're the first person I reach at. But you guys are right there up there too. What is are we going to see a change in ownership, and is there going to be a concerted effort to bring fans back to the stadium?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
A change of ownership won't be before the season. We know that much, but they've got at least 20 offers that they're reviewing right now. They have also the right and the ability to counter those offers, maybe put some more particulars in, and that could be certain requirements they want to see when they hand over the team to a new ownership group. The fan engagement, that's going to be huge for the Elks. I mean, they went on that wicked losing streak at home, which just crushed people. And finally, when it ended, you kind of hope that you'd see an uptick in attendance, and that's exactly what happened. The Elks came up. But one of the things they've done is closed off the upper deck this year. And unless there's need, they will not have people sitting in the upper deck. Now, that's going to flood the lower deck a little bit more, which will be nice for optics for television. Right. And it'll get more, fans like sitting together to talk about things as opposed to being two here, two over there, and two over there when you had 20,000 over a 55,000 seat stadium. The Commonwealth, just like McMahon, when we get there, is one stadium that probably has run its course and needs to be redone, or they need a new stadium. And the Elks are kind of hamstrung by that right now because they have to deal with what they've got. So you go in the lower bowl, you still get about 25 to 30 down there. You're probably looking a little bit better. And had they beaten the Rough Riders in the preseason game, that might have helped a little bit to get some more people excited. But I think they will be better next year, or this year, I should say. But whether that's enough, does 8 wins, or do you need 9 wins to get into the playoffs in the West? That's where they've got to be at least.
Yeah, and when it comes to that stadium, all of us were older guys, so we know the history of that stadium. But for the younger people that are watching and listening, I was going to say Empire Stadium, Commonwealth Stadium was built for the Commonwealth Games. That's what it was built for an Olympics. Basically, it's an Olympic stadium built for what would have been originally the British Empire Games, Commonwealth Games. Now it's Commonwealth Games. And so Edmonton being there was kind of an after the fact. That stadium was not built for Canadian football originally. It was just, they built the stadium for the games, and that's the legacy project that's what was left over. And the Elks, the Eskimos, and then the Elks have been there ever since. Is there a cry in Edmonton from what I've seen on TV and everything I've talked to with people from Edmonton, is the stadium in need of repair? Does it need to be replaced, or are the Elks good where they're at?
Well, it's a decent stadium. There's nothing really wrong with it, but it comes out of an era when bigger was better. You had stadiums like Olympic Stadium in Montreal, CNE Stadium was expanded. You had BC Place built. You had Commonwealth Stadiums, these 50,000 seat stadiums across the league. And at the time, it meant a lot because they could fill them, they could get more revenues. And you look at the teams that were winning Grey Cups in that late 70s and early 80s era, it was all the big stadium teams. Yeah. They were doing the winning. So that managed to help them along to get their bottom line better so they could afford more talent, so they could win Grey Cups. But you're getting to see now sort of a reaction to that, where Saskatchewan builds a stadium that holds 33. Winnipeg builds a stadium that holds 33. Hamilton does the same thing. That smaller, more intimate is better. And I think that's what Edmonton is probably looking at. Interestingly, Clark Stadium still exists. That's the stadium they used to play in. It's literally across the parking lot, and it's still there, still being used. You could rework it if you wanted to. I don't know if there's an appetite yet, though. I think the economy in Alberta is better, but it would take a lot of money. If you build a stadium for Edmonton, you're going to have to build one for Calgary.
Okay. Well, and that obviously gets a segue into with Calgary. But I understand what you're saying with the stadium there in Edmonton, because being from Chicago, well, the Bears won out of Soldier,
Again.
So, yeah. So segueing into Calgary, Heath, starting with you, where are we at with Calgary this year? Are they going to be, because when I hear talk of teams, nobody mentions Calgary in terms of contenders.
I think that's for a very good reason. Now, we could be proven wrong. They could be the 23 Montreal Alouettes of the 24 season. I don't see that happening. When we had Derek Taylor on our podcast, he said something about the Stampeders last year. You could celebrate that they were a playoff team, or you could be negative that they were a 6-win team. And I think the 6-win team is a lot closer than a playoff contender team. Jake Maier, he was the only quarterback that really was healthy and played every game last year for a team. And with that, he led them to a 6-12 record. This is a make or break year for him. I don't think he's the guy moving forward unless he has a breakout season. If I'm a Calgary fan, I'm pretty nervous about them even being a contender. 6-12 is not going to make it. And I don't know if they've improved much to have a better record than that going into this year.
Okay.
And the Stampeders can be guilty of letting some really strong free agents walk. Jameer Thurman, for instance. He's now in Saskatchewan, but he went to Hamilton first. But he was a stud when he was with the Calgary Stampeders. Florin Ormolade, another one. He was a monster on the defensive line, playing for the Argonauts now. The Stamps have had a bit of a bad history lately of not re-signing their top players. And Bo Levi Mitchell could be tossed into that fray as well. What if he stayed in Calgary? What would his future be?
Yeah. And when it comes to Calgary, Dave, I'm sorry. Dave, your thoughts?
My thoughts are, I think on both sides of the ball, they look to be pretty mediocre. I look at the offense, and I don't see anything that scares anybody on either side of the ball. I mean, this sounds awful, but it's like their kicker Prentice is probably their best player on their team. I mean, they have some options on offense, but I just don't. I don't see them consistently moving the ball and putting 30 points up to put yourself in a position. And they're going to have to rely on too many 18, 19, 20-point games being enough to make it happen. And I'm not sure their defense is good enough collectively to hold someone to 15 to 20 points every game. So I think it's going to be a struggle for consistency for them to be in the race in basically what it is. I just don't see enough from them to be there every single week.
And a big loss for them this week. Malik Henry, who was making a comeback from an Achilles injury, has now suffered a season-ending knee injury. And you talk about not having a lot of options on offense. You've just now lost a potential game breaker for the season before it even starts.
That hurts a lot because they were counting a lot on him being healthy this year. Now they still got Reggie Bagleton, but Bagleton isn't necessarily your deep threat. He's a guy that can catch the ball underneath and take it to the house. But then you look at Tyson Philpott. What is he going to provide? Is he healthy? He missed the whole season last year with a hip injury. Is he ready to go? The Stampeders are big questions in that receiving core. Their linebacking core is, to me, probably the most stout thing they have. They've got Micah Awe, they've got Micah Tights, and they've got Cameron Judge. That's going to be a very strong linebacking core. If that can create some confusion in the offense, then on the other side, they may be okay on defense. Demario Houston's there to get turnovers. He's there to create havoc. But beyond that defensive line, do you fear it? Julian Hauser, not sure. There's just a lot of question marks. And again, injuries, people coming back from injury, how are they going to be? They let Derek Wiggins go. He was a very strong player down the middle. The Stampeders right now are in transition, and it's hard to think or believe that necessarily they're going to be a contender. They may make some noise, but if they finish with 6 wins this time, that's not going to make the playoffs.
Okay. And last, before we wrap up with Calgary, stadium talk, ownership, where I thought I saw some, it's been a while, thought I saw some talk about maybe a new stadium attached to a new ice hockey rink. What's going on in Calgary stadium wise, if anything?
Well, right now there's not a lot going on. The Calgary Flames of the National Hockey League won a new stadium, and because they're under the same parent ownership group as the Calgary Stampeders, the Stampeders are being talked about getting something either new or massively renovating McMahon Stadium. It's one of the two.
Okay.
But there's not much appetite right now for provincial money to go towards either project, whether it's Commonwealth getting a redo, a rebuild of a new stadium, something like that in Edmonton and in Calgary. That you're talking about $1 billion or more. If you throw the hockey team in, you're probably up to $2 billion.
Yeah.
So it is just a tough get. And for the time being, the Stampeders are just going to have to live with McMahon. Now, the problem with McMahon is twofold. One, it's the bench seating that goes up in the higher levels. People have railed against that for years. And the second thing is the concourse area. It looks like it's 60 years old.
Okay.
And beyond that, though, it's a lovely site. It's an easy get-to site. The C train takes you right to the stadium. The light rail transit. The vistas from there, like the sight lines, are great. You're close to the field. There's nothing wrong with it that way. I love being at McMahon Stadium. I'm going to be there in September to watch a football game. I love going there. It's just it takes a big hit because it doesn't have luxury boxes. It doesn't have a lot of the amenities that
it's a bare bones stadium. I mean, you can see from the TV. I know this. It's a bare bones stadium. For talking to you guys and talking to others, but just even seeing it on TV, it's about as bare bones as you can get. But from at least a visual, from at least on TV, it doesn't show its age on TV. So it still looks like a great stadium, but like you said, it's about as bare bones, and it needs more than what it already has.
If you look at across the league, there was, Don talked a bit about the huge stadiums. The rest of the cities had these stadiums that were almost cookie cutter to what McMahon is. Old Taylor Field in Regina, old Winnipeg Stadium, Hamilton, Ivor Wynn, they all had that same kind of architecture to them. And in the modern day, fan experience and fan comfort has grown in leaps and bounds. I've been to some new stadiums across North America, and it's amazing the amenities that they've put in place. It's not just going to sit on a bench and watch a football game anymore.
Right.
It needs to be a fully engrossing experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. I mean, last time I went to a stadium was Wrigley Field. I mean, that's, about as old and as traditional as you can get, but they have managed to take a stadium, an ancient stadium and a small footprint into making it truly a true fan experience. So, it can be done, but obviously, like everything else, we're talking money. We're talking, there's always the ask for public funds. Yeah, it's a tough sell. But with all that said about, go ahead, Dave.
Before you jump to the next topic, again, is it realistic to think that they'll be able to renovate McMahon? I guess we'll look at it and go, the cost. Obviously, the cost of a new facility is astronomical, but to take McMahon and get it to something better, is that worth the money? I've only seen pictures of it on TV. Is there a reasonable amount of money that could get it to a point where this is a good thing to do than scrap it?
They could follow what they did in Winnipeg. Now, Winnipeg, when they built the new, I guess it's Princess Auto Stadium now, they put it on the university grounds. McMahon Stadium is on the university grounds. So there's other monies that can kick in if you need them to. But you're right, building it on the same site, that would be the big problem, because you'd have to tear it down and bring it back up in a very short order if you wanted to have the team play there. Or what do you do with them in the interim? most likely the talk in Calgary is to bring the team downtown, which is somewhere around 17th Avenue. There's a couple of sites there that are available, but that ties into the hockey team. They want to, when the Calgary flooded a few years ago, that hockey rink really
that's right. I forgot about that.
And they want out of the Calgary Stampede grounds. They want to move a little bit to higher ground.
Wow. Yeah, I forgot about that. So, well, okay. Well, listen, with all that said, let us land finally in BC, which really this is BC's year in terms of the CFL because they're a team on the rise. They got a great owner. They've people are going to the games, and most importantly, that's where the Grey Cup's going to be held this year. So, and they are my favorite team. I've got my BC stuff in the closet here. I wasn't able to all put it up in the background. I only have so much room in this place for all my sports memorabilia, and my BC stuff it's still kind of packed away right now. So, but with that said, so Heath, I'm going to let you lead off on this one. Where do you see my BC Lion, my British Columbia Lions, as I like to call them? I don't even like to call them BC because they've embraced the full name too over the last couple of years. It's not BC, it's British Columbia. Where do you see them? Do you see them playing for it all this year?
There's a lot of pressure when you're hosting the Grey Cup and you've got high expectations. And I think the Lions do have those high expectations. My season prediction is that they will finish first in the West during the regular season. I would not be surprised to see Winnipeg come in and knock them off in the Western final. I think it's going to be a real battle again between those two teams. And we saw it last year. BC got off to a hot start and came into Winnipeg in week 3 and blew them out of the water. Winnipeg exacted their revenge later on in the season, and that was the big turning point. It could come down to it again this year. It's going to be Vernon Adams Jr. is an exciting quarterback.
I remember that game where Winnipeg came in and just made the statement. I go, okay, BC, this.
But there was another game after that where the Lions, but for a brain fart by Dominique Rhymes, could win that game, and they would have been hosting the West Final last year. But Dominique Rhymes sees the goal line, sees the big city lights, and goes, hey, I can be on all the screens everywhere, and gets tackled at the 10-yard line instead of going down when he had the opportunity and setting up the game-winning field goal. They go to overtime, they lose. Now Dominique Rhymes is back home in Ottawa. Hopefully he doesn't have that situation again, because I'm sure he would probably love the opportunity to redeem, but that was a huge play, and it isn't talked about much.
Yeah, someone called that a great heads-up defensive play by the Blue Bombers.
Well, you're the defense. What are you going to do? You're not going to let him walk into the end zone. But he caught the ball in a spot where he could have gone down, and they would have set up for the game-winning field goal. And he decided to run it down to the goal line, and that 20 seconds killed the clock. Or 20 yards, I should say, killed the clock.
Yeah. But, like I said, BC is a team on the rise. It obviously, I mean, it'd be great if, Nathaniel Rourke could come back and play quarterback. Because, I mean, they lost him. How many? It's been 2 years now? He's been gone 2 years or a year now?
2.
Since he went to the NFL. But, I mean, that was a huge loss to them. But they've made up for it, again, with Vernon Adams Jr. Adams Jr. I mean, he's a playmaker, but surrounding the team, I mean, with all the I'm a huge Lucky Whitehead fan. So you've got these weapons around. I mean, they seem to have all the pieces to make it, to go to the Grey Cup this year. But like you said, Heath, you got Winnipeg standing in the way. When it comes down to the two teams, I mean, is Winnipeg a team on, going down, or are we talking where teams are going on the rise, and are they intersecting it? At what point do these teams intersect and we find out who's on the rise, who's really going to win this thing?
Western final.
Yeah. but will there be a regular season game? Do you think that's going to be like that statement game, like with what happened when Winnipeg just shut down BC in that early season matchup that to me said, okay, Winnipeg's in the driver's seat.
Well, BC goes to Winnipeg August 1st. That's going to be the first test to see how this all plays out. And I believe they only play each other one more time, and that's in BC.
Okay.
So the Bombers and the Lions, you got to think are the two favorites in the West. But BC took some hits. Like Matthew Betts is not there.
Right.
They let go David Menard. They did bring in Christian Covington, who is somebody they were very high on before he went to the NFL. Now that he's back, they're ecstatic that they have him. Questions on that defensive line still, though. If BC is going to do something, they've got to trust their running game, because you can't have, for a third year in a row, your starting quarterback go into the West Final on one leg.
Okay, and Dave, your thoughts?
I think it's going to come down to the West Final on who's healthy, who's got the healthier roster. I mean, I guess the one question I have is, will William Stanback be healthy at week 16, 17, and beyond? That'd be my question. I think Vernon Adams got some great weapons, and I think it's going to really come down to who's healthy come playoffs. Because I think if you match these teams up completely healthy, it's going to be an epic game. It could be 40-40, it could be 20-20, depending on the shape of the play throughout the game. But it'll be entertaining. Hopefully both teams are completely healthy, and it's going to be a whale of a game for the Western Final. That'd be what we all would want, I hope.
Well, it'd be incredible to see that Western Final being played in BC place.
Yeah.
And then, this, in terms of the year for BC to shine, this is it. And is there a truly excitement in BC with the Lions? The fan engagement, is it, are more people talking about the Lions and say the Seahawks down the road? Is that where we're at right now with with Vancouver and BC?
I don't know that that's the case, but let's face it, the BC Lions under Mar Dumont have done amazing things. 50 Cent's going to start the season presenting a concert there. They've already got 40,000 tickets sold for that first game. He's a masterful marketer. I've been to Vancouver to watch a game. Heath has been there as well. You can't help but know it's game day in Vancouver when the Lions are at home, because flags are up everywhere. There's noise everywhere. There's chatter everywhere. You head towards that stadium. There's bands outside. There's contests. He is so adept at bringing you in. You just want to be a part of this. And if the football team on the field can live up to the expectation, and there's some people that don't think they're going to be as good, I'm kind of believing that they're going to finish right where they did last year. The question is, will Winnipeg win as many games? And if they don't, then BC will be the first place team in the West.
Okay. And
thoughts? If you look at where the Lions were 4 years ago before Amar Doman took over and where they are now, the fan engagement, you seem to be a big proponent of fan engagement, and BC is doing it right. They have consistently climbed up in that game day experience. It's a great location and a lot of fun to attend those games. It's not back to where it was in the old Louis Pasaglia days, but the excitement is there, and the Lions are a hot ticket again. It was really tough for a few seasons. People weren't that interested, but they've turned the corner and it's going the right direction.
Yeah. And Dave?
The 50 Cents made its way here to the United States. They made a bunch of different media outlets around here that he's opening up the first game. But no, it's great to see. It's great to see with that announcement the upper deck being opened up as well. So it's really, being in the States, it's great to see the teams drawing well. It's great to see this much conversation being had in the United States about the league as well. So it's just awesome. It's fantastic to see that from from my side of the border, it looks like the game is going in the right direction. To me, it feels like it's thriving in the aspect of there's going to be some really good football teams. A lot of teams have opportunities to really make have really good years, and it's just going to be, for me, it looks like it's going to be an exciting week to week. Anything can happen. It looks like there's a lot of fun things happening in the CFL for 2024.
The nicest thing about all of this is that they've, other than Edmonton, who will be getting a new owner, the ownership that they've found in the CFL have deep pockets and are very committed to the product.
Yeah.
And that has resonated throughout the league. And so you can weather a tough night at the office. You can weather a thunderstorm in Winnipeg that knocks the fans out of the stadium for the night. You can take that hit and still continue on knowing that you're going to be okay at the end of the day. And that's huge. Pelodeau in Montreal was a massive get for the CFL, and Omar Damon, the same thing in BC. These two are going to champion a new way of presenting this league.
And that kind of gets me into my final quote before we wrap everything up, just in terms of the state of the CFL. I don't know, Randy Ambrosie, do you see him in the commissioner slot for the foreseeable future? Or do you see, with new ownership coming in, them, very pro, you got two new owners who with deep pockets. Do you see the ownership groups maybe wanting to go a different direction to get somebody who is willing to, be very proactive with the league, to really take charge of the league and do the things that need to be done that they've done in their own markets? Heath, I'll let you give your thoughts to that.
I guess the one way to look at it is look at the growth in ownership that has happened under Randy Ambrosie's tenure. He has seen great new owners come into the league. The biggest downfall has been the tease and the failure of getting that 10th team in Atlantic Canada. It's something that's been talked about since the 1980s that just keeps kind of popping up every once in a while. It had some real momentum before the lost COVID season of 2020, and unfortunately that's caused things to take a step back. Randy Ambrosie is a very non-confrontational kind of commissioner. He's not in your face. He seems to prefer to take a step back a little bit out of the limelight. And I don't think he needs to be that vocal when you've got these new dynamic owners in place, and you've got a rejuvenated Rough Riders fan base. You've got a very strong Winnipeg team. You see improvements in Toronto's fan base, Vancouver's fan base. I don't think they need to get rid of him at any point unless he feels like he's done enough.
Yeah, I agree with Heath. He's done well. Not everything that he's touched has turned into gold. I mean, CFL 2.0 has been kind of a nebulous entity that still hasn't worked out. Genius Sports and that agreement is now we're starting to see the real fruition of it. So that took some time in coming. But he is not a guy that's going to be out in front of all of this. He's more of his acumen coming into this when they hired him was that he was very business savvy, and that's what they wanted for this league. And as Heath pointed out, he's brought in new dynamic ownership. He's huge on shared best practices. He wants the teams to work together to make sure they all succeed. That's been one of his big points that he's pushed. Overall, I don't see him being pushed out. More likely is that he'll probably leave at some point in the future, but he may stick around until they get a 10th team. It may not be Atlantic Canada. He's kind of put it out there that Atlantic Canada's got to come to him now. He's tired of putting out the feelers to them. Somebody from there has got to show some interest. We may see a team in Ville de Quebec, or Quebec City as it's known.
Yeah, and even that's what I was going to ask you in terms of expansion. Obviously, Quebec City could support its own team, and we know what the demographics are, and we know what how far they are from Montreal. But also, too, any possibility would you think of an ownership? Somebody wanting to maybe put a team down, say, London or even near Detroit. Obviously, with the Lions on the rise down there, that would, I mean, not that both teams, not that a potential expansion team near Detroit would always be playing on the same day as the Lions. But with that said, I mean, do you have, when it comes to CFL expansion, is there more talk? Is it talk other than just Quebec City? I mean, are we talking other cities in Ontario that, are viable? That would be. Go ahead, Heath. Go ahead.
It would be a tough sell. I think there's already 3 teams in Ontario. They're not selling out 35,000 a game right now. They have a lot of deep history though as well. I think a lot, especially in that Greater Toronto, Hamilton area. You grew up a Ticats fan or an Argos fan. Yeah. Bringing somebody else into that market is going to be tough. I think Quebec City would be a more viable option. They don't have a pro franchise there right now. They had an NHL team that is long gone. Having a successful CFL team might be a real springboard to relaunching Quebec as an option for other professional leagues.
Okay. And I think too that they've got natural rivals built in. They've got Montreal down the road, and of course Ottawa, who's just on the other side of the border.
Right. Well, guys, on that note, I'm gonna wrap everything up here and just some final thoughts here. I'm not going to ask for predictions for the Grey Cup because a lot can happen in the next how many weeks? It's like 25 weeks or something. I mean, it's a long CFL season, but just ask, just final thoughts here. Just how do you see the league doing this year, just overall? And Don, I'll let you lead off.
In terms of who's going to finish first and stuff like that, I think I'm kind of in the Montreal camp on one side and either BC or Winnipeg on the other. The league itself is strong, and it's going to get stronger. The stats department has been working hard. There's going to be more stuff that's going to be coming out on game day so that you can participate even further. Overall, it's just an up and up sort of attitude, I think. And the league, in my experience, this is one of the few seasons that I've felt such a positive vibe that it looks like everything is just going in the right direction.
And, okay. All right. And Dave, thoughts?
I'm just looking forward to kickoff, getting everything going. The stats sounds great. I really enjoyed doing the fantasy and picking things and being involved with it each week. For me, that really gave me more incentive and more draw and more connection to everybody. And I think that's just logically the next step, that as they keep continuing that, I think the CFL Plus package down here for outside of Canada is just amazing. And I think it needs, I think this year the growth is going to be noticeable. I think last year a lot of people in the States took the move from ESPN to CFL Plus as a negative. And instead of, hey, you don't have to now subscribe to somebody else, you can just watch it at home, put it up, go from your phone. I went from my phone to my big TV, and it was crystal clear. Just the technological advances to the product, just the enhancement is just going to be that much more for this year, and just take the game on the field just to higher levels, which it's going to be great to see from my end.
Yeah. And Heath?
I'm really looking forward to parity this year. I think over the last couple of seasons, we've seen a 16-2 team. We've seen a couple of 15-3s. Teams are going to be hard pressed to get to 13 wins this year. A 12-win season is going to be a phenomenal year. And I think you're going to see some fights for those top playoff spots as well as those bottom playoff spots. We're going to come down to the wire where teams are fighting around 500 to try to get into that third playoff spot. And that's great to see. As we alluded to earlier, 6 wins isn't going to get you a sniff of the playoffs this year. It's going to be a lot more competitive than that.
Yeah. And that's the key thing about the CFL. It's always been a competitive league. Even when you have teams that are down, again, it's one of those leagues when people who have not watched the CFL, They don't really know what they're missing until they see a game and then watch the last 3 minutes of a game, and just how, you can walk away at the game's over and then come back and like, what happened? It's just so much. To me, it's of the brand of footballs that we have, it's the best, the most exciting brand, with a very deep history that, all of us appreciate and all of us know. But there's so much deep history in there that it's even richer than the NFL. Even though the NFL has a lot more teams and a lot more money behind it, and of course, obviously, we lost in the past. Has it been a year now that we lost Bud Grant? Was it this past year that we lost Bud Grant or was that last season? I can't remember now.
I thought it was 2023.
Yeah, was it 2023 since last season? I can't remember. I mean, I was just thinking because when we started doing this podcast, I actually had conversations with Bud Grant to have him come on the podcast, and it never happened. So it's, but it was one of those, the history of the game. I was trying to explain to my wife as I was texting Coach Grant on a boat in Boston. She said, "Who's Bud Grant?" I'm like, "Oh, he's embodiment of everything football." And also the answer to a great trivia question: who's the only coach ever to win a CFL and NFL title? And it's Bud Grant. And of course, you get people going, "Well, yeah, but he lost the Super Bowl. Doesn't matter. Still was an NFL title at the time."
And Greg,
yeah.
And Greg, selfishly, I'm going to jump in. Please don't try and contact Marv Levy.
Yeah,
with your track record, leave him alone.
No, I actually did contact Coach Marv. No. This was a long time ago. This was quite a while ago. Because Marv lives in Chicago. So I'm like, we were just starting out with just Scott and I. I'm like, well, hell, Coach Levy lives literally right down the street. So I wrote him a letter. He sent me a message back, very politely declined. So, at least I got an answer out of him. It was, no. But no, just talking about the game, the league itself, going back to what you said, Dave, with CFL Plus, for those who are watching and not really sure how to watch the CFL, go to the website. And I think, now let me ask you this, guys, Don and Heath, you guys are in Canada, obviously. Are you able to access the CFL Plus up there?
For preseason.
Okay.
And then we've got TSN for the rest of the season.
Because there's the way around that is, if you don't want to pay the cable company, just do what I do and get a VPN and just, switch over to the United States. I use ExpressVPN. They're not a sponsor of the show, but they should be, because they've allowed me over here in Japan to be able to watch, my ESPN Plus. When I was watching the XFL last year, I could catch all the XFL games. But yeah, I mean, I think the CFL, them giving away the product is the smartest move that they have done in terms of to get people to grow the league. And I think by doing the free streaming, it's going to pay off. And we're not going to see the payoff, for the next 10 years, but there's going to be a payoff in the end. And going back to, just like you said, Don, in terms of, the CFL is definitely trending upward. So, and, I think, and going back and Heath talking about parity, that's the best thing about the league, because on any given, to quote Burt Bell, on any given Sunday, any team can win. And that's very much true. It's more true in the CFL than I think it is, say, in college football, the NFL. I wouldn't even go to speak about the UFL because I haven't really been able to watch any games this year. So, but to me, the CFL is all about fun. So, and that's why we're doing this podcast. And speaking of podcasts, Don and Heath, let people know who have not. I mean, we've got quite a few people watching right now who have not heard your podcast. How to find it? How often do you guys kick out episodes? Because you guys, unlike us, we kick out episodes whenever I can. I have time zone issues. You guys are on a pretty regular schedule. But yeah, tell everybody about your show.
We record typically every Wednesday night. We publish the show the next morning, and we are weekly. Every week, 52 weeks a year, we come out with a show. During the season, we're focused on the CFL itself, whether it's gameplay, big stories that have come out of the league. Off season, that's when we do interviews. We've had Upton Bell, Derek Taylor. We've had a lot of different people. And if you just want to catch up on people in football, come to our podcast just to check a gander at some of the names that we've been able to bring on our show. All wonderful guests. The show is now in its 5th year. We've probably published about 240 of these so far. And Heath came onto the show just after the beginning of it. Pat Mooney is the other person that helped me start it, and he's still here if needed. But it's a lot of fun. I enjoy doing it. I hope Heath does too. I think we have a good time together.
We do. So it's Third Down Gamble. We're hosted by Podbean, and we're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, most of the podcast networks. You can follow us on Twitter as well at the Third Down Gamble. I'm also on Twitter at the Lethal 13. I've got some sports and politics and a whole bunch of other stuff mixed in there, so it's not purely CFL content, but the Third Down Gamble is 100% football all the time.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, Twitter. I mean, just talking about social media and everything with football social media. That's the reason why I do. Like on Twitter, it's where I go for my football fix. And I know, like, you guys have I think, do you guys have a Facebook page? I can't remember off the top of my head. You guys haven't done a Facebook page? That's why we got our Facebook page doing the live streams and everything, because it's fun to sit down with friends and talk football. And we've all gotten together here while I've been here in Japan. So, doing these podcasts, doing the video casts is truly a labor of love. And this type of stuff that, as fans of this is, podcast and video cast is pretty much where I get my CFL news. I don't get it from a regular news source. I get it from the fans who, the content creators. So, with that said, I got to thank you, Don and Heath, for educating me over the years before I even started the podcast and, about the CFL. So, but, well, guys, with all that said, hang on. After we stop recording, we'll talk a little bit more. But for everybody who is watching and listening, hey, thank you very much. As we move into June with the CFL season starting, we're going to try to keep going here. I'm going to be traveling here back to the States starting Sunday. So for me, a lot of our recording schedule is going to depend a lot upon hotel Wi-Fi, and I'm not going to have the big computer, so I'll be traveling with I'm going to be learning as I go while I'm traveling how to do video cast from an iPad and all that stuff. So, but thank you very much for watching, and hey, we will be talking to you and seeing you very, very soon. And again, Heath, Don, thanks for sitting down with us. I know we've gone almost an hour and a half here, but it's always good to talk. And hopefully this season we'll be able to definitely talk more CFL football as we get farther in the season and try to figure out a good day and time that doesn't conflict with your guys' schedule. So, all right, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
With all that said, hey, thank you very much for watching and listening, and we will be talking to you very, very soon. Bye-bye.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.